All right. First of all, thank you all for coming, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm an alumnus of IIT Madras, and I want to thank Professor Junjunwala for inviting me, and also really congratulations on a spectacular research park and incubation cell. So what I wanted to talk about today to all of you was really the work on going from academic research to commercial products. And this is something where I think that universities and academic research are really lifeblood of innovation around the world. And I think that this is something that has had benefits in many countries, and I think India is very ripe for having massive impact of academic research. Now, a lot of academic research is what you would call fundamental research. This is where you don't really worry so much about applications. You don't worry about commercialization. You're really interested in deeper understanding, building prototypes, really trying to understand and do things that you don't know whether they're possible or not. And that's a valuable aspect of academic research. But I think a lot of academic research, especially in engineering fields and computing fields, artificial intelligence, et cetera, is quite applied. And I think when work is applied, or even for that matter, when work is of a theoretical nature, it often has important applications, and it's very valuable to see those through into practice, into commercial products and solutions. So a plan for today, okay, so there's a three-step plan for today. I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe 15, 20 minutes on the startup that I co-founded, Cambridge Mobile Telematics, that came out of research in my research group at MIT. I'll tell you the background and the story just to set the context for some of the lessons that I'll then talk about, which I've learned, and some of them are positive lessons, some are negative lessons, some questionable advice that I might give. And this may or may not be applicable to you specifically, but it's really something where it would apply more to people who are coming out of universities or who are even partly at universities. So it's really more intended for people who may not be embedded in industry for decades, but much more about people who are coming out from the academic world, and of course, Q&A. And I would love for this to be interactive, so please actually just interrupt, ask questions. All right, so let me start by telling you about what CMT is. So the fundamental problem we're tackling is making roads safer around the world. So there's 1.35 million traffic deaths annually around the world. So what this means is that in the next 2 minutes, between 4 and 5 people will have died on roads worldwide. And there are millions and millions of injuries. In fact, 50 million road injuries. This is happening around the world in many countries. In fact, every country. And in the Indian context specifically, it turns out when you do the calculation, roads in India per kilometer driven are about 8 to 10 times more risky than roads in the United States. And the United States as well, the rate of traffic crashes has been going up. In fact, traffic injuries and deaths are the leading cause of fatality for people between the age of 5 and 29 worldwide. It outstrips any other cause of fatality and injury. These are very serious problems. And it's not just the cost of
death per day, per year?
This is per year, 1.35 million per year. Yeah, annual, this is annual, yes. It's of course significant human costs with injuries and deaths, but in addition, there's a massive economic cost as well. Many countries, it's 3% of the GDP costs associated with damage to property, to vehicles, to buildings, etc., caused by these road traffic situations. And another aspect of this is it affects people outside of vehicles. 50% of the people who get injured or affected by road accidents are actually outside of the vehicle. They are pedestrians, bicyclists, road construction workers, etc. So it's something that isn't just about people in the vehicle. So even if you make the vehicle safer and safer with a lot of instrumentation, it may or may not protect the individual passengers, but it certainly doesn't protect the people outside. In fact, a lot of the times the vehicles become really stronger and stronger, causing more problems for people outside. So it's a pretty significant problem. So the mission for our company, which, as I said, grew out of research, is to make the world's roads and drivers safer. And we do that with a three-pronged strategy. The first is what we call fusion of mobile IoT data sources. So this is about collecting data from a wide variety of sensors on phones, on IoT, Internet of Things devices, data from the vehicle systems themselves, data from cameras, whatever sources of data are available, collecting that data with, of course, the user's permission, and processing that data to measure how people drive and to understand what are the factors that determine whether somebody is a good driver or not a good driver. And it turns out you can use data science, statistics, signal processing, machine learning to come up with predicting whether somebody with that driving pattern is a good driver or not a good driver, or how good a driver are they. And then you can develop incentives to make people better drivers. You can provide feedback to them. You can provide feedback to them after their trips. You can provide feedback in real time, or you can provide feedback indirectly, economically. For example, working with insurance companies, so people who drive better get discounts on their insurance, or they get rewards for driving safer. And this stuff really works. I'll show you some examples of what happens when it works. But it's not just about improving driving behavior, which is of course important, but because we cannot prevent crashes, when people get into a crash, being able to use sensor technology to identify crashes in real time and dispatch roadside assistance, send an emergency vehicle immediately in real time. You might have seen the news with our wicketkeeper, Rishabh Pant, got into a crash. If he had had telematics, they would have been able to dispatch emergency vehicles immediately. We can detect it within 10 to 30 seconds, 60 seconds of a crash and send emergency vehicles to get them. Luckily, he was lucky. He was traveling at 5:30 in the morning. He was lucky. Some bus driver saw him and stopped. If it had been 5-10 more minutes, maybe the thing would have caught fire. He might not even have survived. He was very, very lucky to have survived. And it's really important to try to tackle these problems, not just with technology, with data fusion with different sensors, using machine learning, signal processing, and artificial intelligence to provide actionable insights about how well somebody's driving, but then to create what we can think of as the next generation of digital risk and safety solutions. Let me explain what I mean by that. If you look at the key players in mobility safety, it's automakers, it's road infrastructure, and it's insurance companies. They're the three sort of pillars. And of course, government agencies which manage the infrastructure. These are all industries that have been around not just decades, but in fact, centuries. Most insurance companies are at least 100 years old. They're not digitally native. They've been very successful companies. No tech company other than maybe IBM has survived 100 years. So we should not be, arrogant about them. They are very successful long-term companies, but they're not digitally native. Whereas a large number of companies, for example, here in the incubation cell, our company, we're digitally native. We don't even have computers of our own except our laptop, right? All the infrastructure is in the cloud somewhere. It's all digital. But all of these industries are becoming digital. And for them to really bring down things like improve crash rates, all of this, these goals, they have to become digitally native. So as a business, what we aspire to be is a trusted partner that can take these non-native, non-digitally native businesses and make them digitally native so that we can succeed and help them succeed in this mission of making the world's roads and drivers safe. Okay. Now, I want to show you some information about what's happened since COVID. I don't have data for India because we don't operate currently in India. We operate in 17 countries. And what you can see here on the y-axis is just road fatalities. We see 30 to 40,000 fatalities. But during COVID, the amount of driving went down, okay? But in 2020, the amount of road fatalities went up 7.5% in the US, and then another 10.5% in 2021. And if you look over this entire time frame, we're talking about a 20.7% increase per kilometer because the amount of driving went down because during COVID, people stopped driving. What happened was people were rush hour went away, so people were driving much faster, leading to more crashes. And then people are hooked onto their phones. The amount of phone distraction has gone up. I'll show you some data about phone distraction. And by the way, I've spent about 2-3 weeks in Chennai right now, and you can't move around without seeing people on their phones while driving. And of course, here they're also on their phones on their motorcycles. It's very impressive. And even on our campus, people are riding, their students are riding bicycles. It's a feat. One hand is on the bicycle, another hand is on the phone. They're shouting into the phone. It's remarkable, but it's also unsafe. Okay. So I think this is the fundamental problem. These phones have become a part of our bodies today. We don't even realize it. But the average amount of time screen is on is 4 to 4.5 hours a day. Probably for the youngsters, it may be even more. So 4.5 hours per day of screen time. That's the screen's on. This is just extraordinary. This is a part of our body nowadays. So I call these phones weapons of mass distraction. For some of you who might be old enough to remember weapons of mass destruction, this is weapons of mass distraction. Pre-COVID, 37% of trips had significant phone distraction. This is where people's eyes are off the road. They're moving their phone while driving. More than 1/3 of trips have significant phone distraction. And in the US and Europe, 36% of them happen over 50 miles an hour, 80 kilometers an hour. We're talking about people who are just not paying attention while driving. And just to get bearings here, 100 meters at 55 miles per hour takes 3 seconds. Think about driving 3 seconds off the phone. You're out there, you're looking at a text, you're looking at your Instagram, 3 seconds, that's 100 meters. It's enough to plow through so much. So here's an interesting aspect of what happened during the pandemic. So this is plotting here the average amount of distraction, number of minutes of phone distraction per hour of driving. Okay, and I've normalized it so that the zero base here is the average of the year 2019 before the pandemic. And then you can start seeing here, the WHO declares the pandemic in March 2020, and you can start seeing an increase in the number of minutes of phone distraction per hour of driving. It's about a 30% increase overall, including in the day and the night between February 22 and February 2020. And all of these are the reasons why people are actually becoming the roads are actually becoming less safe. This is statistically true. The data is indicating that roads, even though cars are becoming safer, crash rates are going up, injuries are going up. So that's the ethos in which our company operates. So what we built is a platform. You can't see it on top. It's called Drivewell. It's a fusion platform. Drivewell is the name of the platform. On the left, it collects data from a wide variety of sources. We take data from phone sensors, the accelerometer, gyroscope. It's all automatic, runs in the background. You don't have to open the app and do anything manually. When you start driving, it automatically detects movement and starts recording data from phone sensors. We've also built this IoT device called a tag. This has its own inertial sensors. It attaches to the windshield, and it has very high quality accelerometers on it. So it can measure the movement patterns of the vehicle. But if somebody got into a crash, it's able to record the data. It's like it's white in color, but it's like a black box for your vehicle. So you can use it for doing forensics of what happened during a crash. And it's a very inexpensive, lightweight device. We've actually shipped over 26 million of these devices. So it's a very scalable way to do that. Now, increasingly, cars are getting more connected. They have their own sensors. We work with car makers to try to process their data, that data as well. And we have some video products and some fleet third-party fleet devices that we take all of this data and we process that into this platform, and we provide the following insights. Risk scoring, as I mentioned, we can use sensor data, things like hard braking, the amount of hard braking activity somebody does, hard acceleration activity, the amount of risky speeding that somebody does compared to the other traffic on the road, the amount of phone distraction. With phone distraction, you just measure it from the gyroscope of the phone. You know, it has a rotational sensor and the accelerometer, and you can use this to figure out whether somebody is distracted or not, because we've collected ground truth from a lot of participating users with video cameras, where we've recorded them driving over many months with their consent, and we're able to build machine learning models that can use labeled ground truth data from video, and then you can build those models on your phone sensor data. So you can tell whether the phone is being moved in a way or is being held up this way, or is it in a mount and somebody's tapping on it. All of those you can build machine learning models for to determine if people are distracted by the phone without looking at what applications they're running. It's just based on pure signal processing and machine learning of the sensor data. Then you can identify if somebody's in a crash by looking at the amount of G-forces as well as the velocity difference from the sensors. And you can use that to automate claims. You can start to process that when they have an insurance claim. You automatically populate the information about what the context was for the crash. And you can start to use this even for damage assessment, so that people who have a very severe damage, instead of spending days or weeks of expense and towing the car to all sorts of places, you just give them, it's a total loss. You just give them a check, they go buy a new car, you save money. Or if it's a small incident, instead of going through days of hassle and sending an adjuster and doing a lot of fighting, just send them a check for a certain amount, the process is done. And you can use telematics to determine what it should be. And last but not least, you can use incentives to change behavior. I'll show you some video examples of the type of impact you can have with this. Can you go to the next slide? Maybe my pressing the button is not actually working. I should just tell you. Every day right now, we process 1 trillion sensor data points, not including video. This is data from accelerometers and GPS data, horoscope data. It's about 1 trillion points. And collectively, over the last 4 years, we collected about 25 petabytes of pure sensor data. In terms of the businesses themselves, where it works, we work with personal insurance companies, companies like Progressive Insurance, State Farm, Geico, etc. We work with commercial insurance as well. And these are the other sectors. Work with automakers, some wireless carriers like Verizon to build family safety applications where people want to see if their families are driving safely or their teen drivers are driving safely. We have some projects with some gig companies like Uber. And we also work with governments and foundations to create safe driving contests. I'll show you some examples of the work we are doing with city governments and state governments to foster a culture of safer driving. So currently we have about 85 programs in 17 countries. Over the last 3 years, we measure about 25 million drivers that go through our platform. And in the US, we work with 21 of the top 25 insurers. So in fact, if you look at our customers, 82% of the vehicles in the US belong to one of our customers. So these are some of the logos that we work in. And all of this came out of academic research that we had done at MIT between 2005 and 2010. And then, it's a long haul. It took another 5, 7, 10 years to commercialize it to get to this point. So here's the type of programs you can create. How do you make people better drivers? So the most popular ones of these are insurance discounts. If you drive well, you get a discount on insurance. It's very powerful because people like these discounts. And today, the minimum participation discount is about 10%. And some insurers 10% discount for just participating in the program. And then when it comes time to renew the insurance, typically it's a 6-month renewal cycle, you get a discount if you've driven safer. And money talks, people become better drivers. Even better than this are reward programs. My own insurance company works like this. I have 2 daughters who are they go to college now, they drive. My insurance price went up by a factor of 3 when they started driving because they don't have a record and everything. But let me tell you, data shows they're actually among the safer drivers in my family. We have 4 drivers in my family. The worst driver is not one of them. I won't say who it is. But the worst driver is not one of them. They're very good drivers. And the reason why is they don't care about insurance discount. They're not paying for it. But rewards work. So they participate in a program where we've integrated with a rewards provider. Every week, every 2 weeks, they accumulate points. Every time they drive, they accumulate points. And then they just redeem it for, in one case, it's a Starbucks. It's just a gift card for coffee. That's it. It's very simple. I also participate in this. I get it for Amazon gift cards. So you can pick from one of these things. And these types of incentives, they act as nudges. They're positive incentives. You can apply it to anything, by the way. You can apply it to personal fitness. Give yourself, put some money away for $1,500 rupees, put it away somewhere and spend it over 2 years or 1 year. Every time you exercise, give yourself a little bit from that. It works really well. The same thing here, somebody else is giving money for good behavior to be incentivized. And with little nudges like that, it causes enormous changes in driving behavior. And I'll show you some examples from South Africa, which is very similar in terms of economics to India, in terms of economic spread, in terms of driving conditions, road conditions. It's not that different. And these ideas work really well. We have programs targeted for young drivers. This one is in the UK with a company called Marmalade. Again, for young drivers, you focus on young drivers, incentivize them to become better drivers. Statistically, young drivers are much less safe. That's just the way the data is. However, they also improve the most. And that's also great. Family safety, I mentioned. Family safety is pretty interesting because this is where you can get together as a family and you can look at each other's driving. And you can start to use sort of peer pressure a little bit. Or you can have leaderboards where you create a ranked list of all the people in a city. And you can have contests to make people better drivers. So it's not always about money. Sometimes it's about just pride. People want to be at the top of a leaderboard. And that is also a positive incentive to make people better drivers. The point is not that one is better than the other. What we've learned is different people react to different incentives. Some people want money. Some people don't care. Some people just want to be number one. Some people just want to get better. These are people who may have fitness trackers, they're always looking at the number of steps, those type of people. Whatever it is, you want to provide incentives for them to become better drivers. The thing about driving is it's easier to drive than it is to swim or ride a bike or do many of the things. In fact, cars are the most amazing, engineering feats for user experience. It's so easy to actually drive, but it's also relatively easy to drive badly because there are so many distractions. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so here's some examples. This is Discovery. Insurer is a very long-term partner of ours. We worked with them for over 10 years. They have created a great program on top of our platform called Vitality, and they're all about behavior. It's all about driving behavior incentives. They find a 24% reduction in the frequency of crashes and a 32% increase in safe drivers. Their drivers are 32% safer than the rest of population in South Africa. This is a win for them because they now collect insurance premiums. They don't have to send claims. It's a win for their users who become safer. They don't get into crashes. They don't get hassled. And it's a win for society because the number of crashes have reduced. And they have public white papers on this stuff. They're a public company, but they've written a lot of white papers explaining how to get behavior change to really work on top of these types of telematics technologies. This is one where we worked with City of Boston. We've done some programs with different cities, and I'm really hopeful that we can do something like this with Indian municipalities and Indian governments as well. This is a system where we get sponsors to sponsor safe, driving contest. It's a branded driving contest. It could be, some company's driving contest. And we can give rewards. We have a lot of different types of rewards. You can give daily rewards, weekly rewards, grand rewards. And what we find is a 47% reduction in phone distraction, 37% reduction in harsh braking, and 35% reduction in speeding for people who participate in these programs that are incentivized around just contests. And this contest here won an award for Vision Zero. Is this organization? It's an international organization that's trying to make traffic fatalities go to zero by 2030. And this program won an award for the most innovative, one of the most innovative ways of bringing down traffic crashes. Can I show the video?
Well, Los Angeles is a city of automobiles. People here love their cars, drive a lot. So one of the biggest issues that we have is the epidemic of distracted driving. We needed to find a creative way educating drivers to be safer drivers. One of the key things we did with education is a fun, competitive app called LA Safest Driver. It's developed by Cambridge Mobile Telematics for the city of Los Angeles. And so through LA Safest Driver, we got tens of thousands of people to participate in competing against one another to try to be LA's safest driver. It was pretty clear that among those people that downloaded the app, became conscious about driving better, that actually happened. That speed went down among that group of people, that distracted driving went down among the group of people that downloaded the app. And in the end, that meant fewer accidents, fewer injuries, which is an enormous benefit to the city. So I would recommend to any other city, state, other jurisdiction considering what their suite of opportunities are for driver education to consider teaming up with Cambridge Mobile Telematics to develop an app and to do something similar to LA Safest Driver.
All right, so sometimes people are pretty cynical about whether driving behavior can actually change. And I want to show this picture. This is actually real advertisements from the 1950s selling cigarettes. This one is about the smooth taste expectant mothers crave. They were selling cigarettes to pregnant women. And this one is, I don't know if you can read it at the back. It says, people are always telling me that smoking causes low birth weight. Talk about a win-win-win, an easy labor, a slim baby, and the full flavor of Winston's. So people are actually selling the stuff, and this is how society used to be. And yet today, behavior has changed. Everybody knows because of education, because of public awareness, that this is not something that you should do. So I don't think we should be cynical about our ability to change people's driving behavior. Currently, phone distraction, and unsafe driving is quite an epidemic. We just don't see, we sort of got immune to it because it happens every single day. And, when some sort of incident happens rarely and it's big, we react heavily to it. But something that just has become part of society, we've just become very immune to. But it doesn't have to be that way. we should be able to cut it down. We should be able to stop it. So I do think it's possible to change these norms, and these types of programs operate as incentives. But it's also important to understand it's not about technology and products alone. It's also about creating public awareness. It's about policy. It's about influencing it all together. And that's an important aspect of one of the lessons that I think is really important to understand as you start to roll out products in and try to make an impact on society. So I'm actually going to skip this. I want to talk about some of the lessons that I've learned. And some of these lessons are questionable. Like all advice, it may or may not apply to any given individual context. But I'm going to start by telling you 5 lessons. Okay. So the first lesson goes back to the history of this. So, we built this project with my collaborator, Sam Madden, and we had a bunch of students and postdocs. And it's a project called CarTel. It ran between 2005, 2010, 2011 timeframe. And this was before the iPhone and Android. We worked with some old type of phones. We built embedded devices. And then when the iPhone came, we started working with those devices. We partnered with local taxi companies, and we put these things out there. And then we built something called the Pothole Patrol. In 2007, we deployed this in a fleet of many taxis in the Boston area, and we were measuring road traffic conditions. So every day we would publish a website of the 50 worst roads in Boston. And this was, remember, back in 2007, we were using machine learning. We didn't know it was called machine learning. We were doing something with signal. Now, today we would call it machine learning. And all of this was academically very good. And then the press started writing about it. We got articles in newspaper, and we thought, this is great. I saw that we were getting some academic success. We saw press was writing about it. I said, there's got to be a company, some sort of commercial idea out there. And when you come in as an academic, you start thinking that the most important thing that matters is the technology. When you come in as an engineer, you often think it's the technology. What are people buying for? They're buying the technology. And the first lesson is, it's not about the technology. You can't see the things. Is there a way to get rid of that thing on top? Like, the most important thing is the title. If you can find a way to get rid of it, I'll continue to talk. So lesson 1 is customers care about solutions. They don't care about technology. In fact, when you start, you think it's all about your ideas. Nobody cares about ideas. The academia is all about ideas. Academics are about ideas. Ideas matter in academia. Publish the paper, it's about the idea. What's the novel idea? In the real world of products, in the real world of customers, ideas are dime a dozen. Lots of people have ideas. You look at the patent literature, lots of bad ideas get patents. It's not about the idea. What customers want is not even your product. What they want is a solution to some problem that they have, or you have to convince them that they have. So in other words, they have some job they want done. Your job when you have a product is to take your technology, take your idea, convert it into a product, but ultimately figure out how you get the job done. So the important thing here that I learned is we came in with a set of technologies and set of ideas, but what mattered more were the type of methods, the type of skills, the type of tools that we were using to build our technology. So I'll give you an example. We became very, very good at taking noisy sensor data from a wide variety of sensor sources and doing interesting inferences and learning and insights from the sensor data. Those set of tools mattered the most because the specific academic software or whatever algorithms we came up with had to change. Technology changed, the actual problem statements changed, but those tools are very, very valuable. So you should figure out how to use the methods that you've developed as an academic or in your research to help customers get the job done. But the important part of that is figuring out what job they need to get done. And a lot of what I'm talking about is not for consumer startups. I don't know much about building consumer companies. Though I've advised and my students have started them. This is much more about B2B, to businesses or reaching customers via other businesses. So this is much more for enterprise technology. But I still think even end consumers have some job they want done. And so you have to figure out how to get the job done. So number 1, it's not about your technology. You have to figure out how to build products so that you can solve a problem that actual users have. And the art of what you have to do in the first year of your work before you start the company even, is figure out what problem they have and how you can help solve the problem. The second lesson is it never hurts to be customer obsessed. It's not just worrying about it. You have to be obsessed with them, especially in the early customers. It's really important to become a trustworthy partner to them. The more they trust, the more you can provide value to them, the more impact you can have on them. And frankly, it's the only important source of validation is what your customers say. It doesn't matter even what your investors think. If they're customers and they're paying for the product, investors are very, very happy. Nobody else matters to the success of a venture than the customers. It's frankly the only thing that matters. So everybody in your company, your partners, your team has to focus on being customer obsessed. You have to listen to them and try to partner with them. But you also have to realize, the customer is not always right. You sometimes have to be a force to convince them because they aren't always right. There's a famous quote from Ford, Henry Ford of the car. He said, if I had listened to my customers, I would have built faster horses. He built the car instead. So you have to also have the conviction to be able to convince them based on what you're hearing from them and triangulating from what you're hearing. So second lesson is to be customer obsessed. Yes? Yeah, our customers are insurance companies, car makers, people like that. So we sell to insurance companies, and then the product is offered for free to end consumers. So it's somewhat of a unique, not unique, it's a bit unusual. There are some other companies like that, but it's B2B to C. Yeah, B2B to C. Now, there's some advantages of that and some disadvantages of that. So the normal companies are B2B or B2C. The B2C has one advantage, which is we can get to millions and millions of users without investing massively in marketing or sales. In our case, especially with the sales, it's a very skewed distribution, right? Effectively 82% of consumer of the insurance market is in 20 companies. So it's relatively small in terms of getting through to them. And scaling can be done without investing massive amounts in marketing. But the drawback is, if we want to get the revenues and numbers, in a B2C company, you turn on an advertising spigot, you undertake some losses or whatever it is, turn on advertising, you get more users, and you have that flexibility. B2B2C doesn't have that flexibility. In contrast to a B2B company, the B2B companies are great, but you kind of don't get to work on actually end user applications. You're sort of behind. So I actually like our ability to work with consumers. We build lots of apps. In fact, I forgot to say this, but we have about 450 people. We have 35 people in the research park here. Some of them are in the audience. And last year, the team here owns all the white labeled applications. They deployed 60 applications, more than one a week from the team here that they deployed. So we get to interact directly with end consumers as well. But and to the extent that there are other companies who are B2B2C, there's a lot more about these lessons that might apply.
Have you tried B2C direct?
We've tried only insofar as these contests are concerned, but we haven't tried in a particularly concerted way. It's a good idea, but I'm not sure it's the right idea for us right now. We're on a good path.
Money talks.
What's that?
Money talks.
Well, it's money, it's focus. I think that's one of the other lessons. It's really critical to pick a small number of things and do them well. Yeah. But thanks. Yeah, please interrupt. Okay. So this one is very valuable and interesting. I did not know this until several years later, and I honestly wish I had known this. Because one of the first things that when you come out of academic research, you don't really understand what a product is. You kind of think that the technology and the research that you've done and people say, well, is your algorithm or your system that you've built is the most important thing, but putting that into a product is an art. And so this is a 4 risks approach. It's sort of been propounded by many people, including the Silicon Valley Product Group. There's books about this. If you already know this, great. If you don't know it, I'll explain it to you. And not all of these are important at the very early stage, but the 4 risks approach is, number 1, what's the value of whatever it is you're trying to make into a product? Is it valuable and will they engage? How do you determine what the value is? And the trick here is to try to do this quickly within weeks or months, 2 or 3 months, without building the whole thing, because building the whole thing and trying it out may take 18 months or even 12 months, and you don't have that sort of time. So the question is to figure out, with all the ingenuity and cleverness that you have, whether people will engage with your product. So sometimes what you can do is create websites with mock-ups and see whether people will sign up for your product. Will they take the trouble of filling out a form and getting to the stage where they sign up for the product? Will they get onto your mailing list or whatever it is? So that's one way to figure this out. Another part of this that remains an art is And I'm sure anyone running company or anyone involved in any aspect of a company is wondering, how do you price a product? It's an art. You don't want to price it too high because then they'll go away. You don't price it too low because you're giving up stuff for free. Assessing the value is critically important. And I think figuring out, is it valuable at the very early stages and will they engage is the first question that you have to be able to answer out of the gate. And this is where your early customers really can be very, very valuable. If nobody actually buys products from a startup because they want to. 0 people buy from a startup because they want to. They buy from a startup because they have to. Okay, that's an important. But it's too risky to buy from a startup. It might not be around in 12 months. So you have to have enough of a reason for people to want to engage with you, and this is something that you can assess. And you might have 100 discussions and 3 of them succeed, but then you have to pull through those 3. The second one is usability. Is it actually usable, and will they experience the value? And this one is interesting because sometimes you might build something, but it's too complicated to use because it doesn't fit in with the rest of the infrastructure that they have. You might have a really good way to analyze something, or do something for them. But if it doesn't fit into the rest of their workflow and pipeline, particularly in enterprise context, it becomes really hard to use. So having somebody who's thinking about it from a product perspective, asking how will people use it, not just end users, but even business users, all users of anything you provide, is the second thing. The third one is feasibility. You come out of academia, you have some research ideas, maybe you need to build a product, which always takes effort, especially the last 10% takes 80% of the time. It's enormously complicated to get it done. But can you actually build it? And how fast can you get proof points? How fast can you put something out there and get it, getting that feasibility? And the thing is, if you have a product already, then you can start to instrument it and measure and get a lot of data. The art in the early stage is to do it with almost no data. This is where instinct matters a lot. And I don't think it's possible to really teach it. One makes mistakes, but you talk to people, and some people have a very good instinct for this. They have a very good instinct for what people are likely to use, and a good instinct for how much is it going to take to build it. And I'll talk a little bit about lessons on a team, and I'll tell you how to maximize the success here. And the trick here is to hire people who can do multiple things. As you grow the company to a later stage, I found that specialization matters a lot. But in the early stages, it's great to have people who can do multiple different things, because you at the outset don't know which of the 5 things you need. So having somebody who can do 3 or 4 different things matters more than ultra specialization. Once you grow, then specialization starts to make a bigger difference. The last one is viability. If you build it and everything else, can you actually sustain it? Because lots of times you can build something and get early users, but then after a while, you hit a roadblock. You can't actually fund in a continuing way. And especially these days, the focus on profits is much more important than ever before. Even for early stage companies, showing to investors a path to profit is much more valuable. It didn't used to be like that until 2 years ago, but now it's valuable. But that's a good opportunity, especially for companies from here. Okay, lesson 4 is about initial team. And this, we got very, very lucky. Almost everybody that we hired I started the company in 2010, 2011, 2 co-founders, one academic professor colleague of mine, Sam Madden, and then Bill Powers, my partner, business partner for many years. And everybody we hired into our company before 2014 is still with the company. It's just very lucky for us because we got lucky with our initial team. So your initial team of a company is your lifeblood. You live or die by that initial group of 8 to 10 people. And you have to be very generous with them. And, I don't even, anyone starting a company, just don't worry about equity. They are the most valuable people that you'll have. You want them around through the whole war. And you can never be too generous to that initial group. And you have to choose wisely. And sometimes that means you go and you bring in people that you've interacted with before. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So typical composition in the early stages, you can't see it because it's blocked there. I would say mostly engineers in a tech company like the sort of ones that I'm involved with. I would say you need 1 product person. We made a mistake. We didn't have product people. I just didn't know. And we just assumed that I knew how to define a product. But the reality is a product professional who understands it would have been a huge difference. My advice is to hire engineers who are generalists. People call them full stack. I don't like the word full stack. I think of them as generalists, people who have the ability to do multiple things. Full stack sometimes means the same person does everything. No, what you want is people who have the ability to do multiple things and then they specialize. So we had people, still have people who built our cloud infrastructure, and then the one or two of them decided to go do our mobile SDK. Then they worked on our IoT. Those people are worth their weight in gold. One business development person. If you're a founder or a co-founder of a company, you are the salesperson. You don't need a salesperson. You are the voice of the company. You are the one selling it because you don't have a product. You have a vision. So I wouldn't invest in anything other than this, and do not overhire. You're better off with a small team, because one thing that people have repeatedly learned is smaller teams somehow produce even more than bigger teams. Because for bigger teams, you need good organization. The problem is you don't even have clear goals at this stage. What you need is agility, and what you need is quickness. Third thing, I've 14, 15 companies have come out of my, former students and other colleagues of mine that I work with closely, and many, many other companies coming out of students and academia. The single biggest determinant of success is whether there's co-founders, more than one founder. It's, of course, companies succeed with one founder from time to time. Or sometimes we think it's one founder today, the co-founders, nobody hears about them. But every company that I believe succeeds has multiple people. It's very lonely. You can't do it alone. It's not even worth it. It's not fun. And part of life is also to have fun doing whatever you're doing. You really should try to make sure there's a small group of people who together, and then have an initial team that you view as essentially co-founders, because they are your life. And the last thing is you have to seek out mentors. It's really important to have good mentorship for everybody, including people who are experienced. It doesn't matter. There's always things one doesn't know that somebody else has an experience on. And again, with all advice and mentorship, get multiple and triangulate, because you can't just adopt somebody else, including everything I'm saying here. To the extent it's useful, it'll be useful only if you triangulate it yourself, is what you need. Okay, and then this is my last one. Okay. So this is a very important lesson. This is what I call virtues of leadership. So I think everyone can be a leader. It's not just about who's the CEO or who are the VPs or whatever. Those titles don't matter. Everybody can be a leader, and everyone should aspire to be a leader. So to me, leadership is about three key things. The first one is idealism. You have to learn, every one of us has to learn to tell a good story, because it's about us convincing everybody that what we're doing is worthwhile, and you want them to come on the journey with you. So in our case, the idealism was to create a simple mission. And it comes with time. I want to make the world's roads and drivers safer. It's a very simple, idealistic mission. And you try to fulfill that mission with that sense of purpose. So every day when you wake up, what good shall I do this day? Everyone has this, right? At the end of the day, when we wake up, you need some purpose. What can I do that's good today? So when you create, or if you're part of an organization, whether it be a startup, whether it be a bigger company, everyone can be an entrepreneur and a leader. You really have to be thinking about placing the work you do in some bigger context with some sense of purpose. And then what you find is people will really fall on the tracks. And you also want to fall on the tracks. We got, a couple of weeks ago, we got a message from one of our users who said that we detected a crash. He had a heart attack. He hit a tree. He was on the side of the road. And our technology detected it, sent tow trucks, etc. We got $0 from this person. Doesn't matter. It was very meaningful because you created something that helps somebody. I think that's what you need. So as a leader, think about placing the work you do in a broader context. Second thing, why do most startups fail? What? Yeah, because people give up. It's the single biggest reason. Now, I understand completely. By the way, when you come out of academia, especially if, I don't know if there are any professors here, the easiest thing in the world, honestly, is for professors to start companies by partnering with other people, because you have a fully secure job. There's no excuse to not create something, because we don't have to give up. You can always go back to something. So I think that for everybody, I understand people giving up, right? Because economically, if you can't make money for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you have to give. I get that. But to the extent you're in the fight, it is a fight. Nobody wants to buy your product. You're a startup. You might not be here tomorrow. You have to want it, and your team has to want it. It has two parts. One is to really try not to give up, to try to be like a cockroach. People say the cockroach can withstand nuclear disaster, etc. It's probably true, right? And don't be afraid to be honest with your team, with your customers, because what you want to do is to get to a point where you want to show your customers and your early partners that you're here for the long haul. They want to work with you. You want to work with them. And the third one is the most important, evolvability. This phrase is really important. Okay, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. You don't have to have the most smart people. You don't have to have the most brilliant engineers, the most brilliant business. Doesn't matter. It's the one that's the most adaptable to change. It is absolutely true. The number of times you have to look at an opportunity, figure out a way in which what you do adapts, that's what's going to win. All the successful companies in the world, take Apple. That thing has, it's incredible what they did. So in the 90s, there were 3 months of payroll. You have to seize it. They've somehow managed to seize it, and they now become, they've become too big to fail, right? So seizing those moments and evolving is really important. And so everybody talks about disruption. Everybody talks about revolution. I believe very much in revolution through evolution. Everything is small steps and understanding the moments that you can try to make decisions. It doesn't matter if the end result is a failure, because it's about that journey. And if you go through that journey with these principles in mind, I think that most companies, most ventures will succeed, especially ones that come out of research. Because I'll tell you the thing about research, researchers are very good at is dealing with ambiguity. You don't know if it's going to work or not. You're very good at ambiguity, right? But now it's about taking that and applying it to try to make an impact on the world. So there's a few others. One of them is it's really a marathon, not a sprint. Many startups I know think everything has to be done in the next 3 months. I'm going to work really hard, eat noodles in the office. That's all nonsense. Nothing great happens in 3 months of noodles, right? You need, of course, from time to time there are deadlines and you need to do that. But the more important thing is to take it with persistence. It's really a marathon, and you want to try to be at the end of that marathon. The other thing I tell people is don't worry about competition. If you have customers engaged with you, competition doesn't matter. But stay away from the things that the big giants are doing. If they're already doing it, it's too late. Just work on something else. If Google is doing something, it doesn't matter. But if somebody says, could Google do it? That's a different question. Google could do anything, but will they? Probably not. You have to engage with your customers. They are the most important thing. Competition doesn't matter. All these conferences where people are talking, it doesn't matter. Focus on your customers. And I think we'll take this in Q&A if there are questions about funding and so on. At CMT, we didn't take venture money for many years. About 6 years in, we had reached some good momentum, had some proof points, and we took an investment from SoftBank, about $500 million, a big investment. Then we did it for growth. We are now rapidly growing, but it happened at a growth stage. Now, I understand not every company has the ability to run with revenue. You have to take funding. But my main lesson around that is it's around momentum. You want to project some degree of momentum and some proof points, and then you get good deals on funding. We can talk more if there are questions about this. So with that, I thank you very much.
So I have 2 questions. What is the challenge between developing telematics for 4-wheeler vehicles and 2-wheeler vehicles? In your presentation, it was majorly based on 4-wheeled vehicles. What is the challenge for 2-wheeled vehicles? Because in India, half of the population is just driving, 2-wheelers, and it's very unsafe as well. So what is your take on this? And can you please brief on this?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are working on that. So I don't have a good answer. It's something that customers in Southeast Asia and other places have really wanted. It's something that we're working on. This is a good question. I think if you're coming out of university, my advice would be to try to get as many proof points as possible in the university itself. To build a prototype with your research group, academic group, get users, and then I think it becomes a lot easier. So at least insofar as university-oriented companies are concerned, maximize, this is what I tell my students, just maximize the time, get users, because you can always publish a paper based on that experience. Just maximize the amount of time you spend at a university getting those proof points. For people in a different context, I think you're right. I mean, I think bottom line is you're going to have to fund it in some fashion, and it's not easy because consumers don't want to pay anything. It'll be zero. So you have to raise money.
And I'm Prasad, and I am founder of a company, Behaviour Studios, which is working on augmented reality and virtual reality. My question is that have you approached any licensing attorneys to reduce this activity? Kind of driving
You mean while they're getting a license?
before getting the license, have you tried approaching them to adopt this?
Yeah, it's a good idea. We haven't. It has come up in some discussions, and I know that there are some organizations in India, for example, that are trying to do some automated licensing tests as well. It could be a good opportunity for us, but we have not really pushed it.
All right. I think we'll stop here. We will be here outside. We'll have a cup of tea and maybe you can mob in. It's a really great pleasure. Thank you. We are very proud that he is our alumnus and continue to work. Thank you. And from our team, there is a small memento. One of our startup. This is our rural shoe. Open it up.
Yeah.
Check it out. This is a shoe which is made for farmers. Now you come see outside now, and you will be there.